camera.
Your Worship, before you get that, I just want to note the introduction of one late item for the procedural motion, and that's adding community charter section 9.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Ms. Gurry was on top. I should have been looking at it instead of the regular. Yes, so we have that late item. So therefore, procedural motion to go in camera now. So moved, Councillor Thorpe, second Councillor Bonner. All those in favor? Any opposed? Good evening, everyone. I'd like to welcome all of you to the September 14th regular meeting of Council. I'd like to first recognize that we are gathered on the traditional territory of the Snuneymuxw First Nation. Our clerk tonight will be Ms. Sheila Goury. Tonight's regular meeting of Council will be held in accordance with the Community Charter, Council Procedure Bylaw 2018, number 7272, and Ministerial Order number M192 governing open meetings during a state of emergency, and the Provincial Health Officer Order regarding mass gathering events. Therefore, members of the public are required to observe meetings virtually and not attend in person, and question period will be suspended throughout the duration of the provincial health orders in effect. The first item on the agenda is the introduction of late items, and Ms. Goury, we do have a couple.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. The first item is we're adding agenda item Housing Agreement Bylaw 2020 number 7313 and reordering the agenda item 13B. And the second is agenda item 14A, Councillor Bonner, Notice of Motion Pilot Program to reduce residential speed limits. And that's it, Your Worship.
Thank you very much. A motion for approval of the agenda is amended. Moved Councillor Thorpe, seconded Councillor Armstrong. All those in favour? Any contrary? Motion carries. Motion for adoption of the minutes is circulated. Moved Councillor Bonner, seconded Councillor Martman. All those in favour? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the Mayor's report tonight. I want to start on a sad note. Many people do work in the community. They volunteer, and some of the volunteer work is joyful work. It's easy work. But just last week, very sadly, one of our Board of Variance members, Ronald Nadeau, passed away on September 8th. It was unexpected, and he will be missed. And the reason I mention sometimes it's easy work, the Board of Variance is not easy work. You don't get paid for it. You're having to make decisions that involve differing views, and you have to put yourself out. You also have to bring a level of expertise to it. Mr. Nadeau was an active member of the Board of Variance here for more than 2 years, and the language that was used by those who knew him best, that is his knowledge, his expertise, his wit, will be greatly missed. So I want to express publicly tonight the thanks of this city to him for his work, to his family, because invariably when you volunteer in the community, you are taking time away from your family, and that is something people sometimes forget. So thank you for your service, Mr. Nadeau, to your family. Our thoughts are with you. When death is unexpected, it is always harder than having the opportunity to prepare for it, and we're very conscious of that tonight. The next item I want to talk about is Firefighters National Memorial Day. Back in 2017, as a tribute to firefighters who risked their lives to keep Canadians safe, the then Minister for Public Safety and Emergency Preparedness, the Honourable Ralph Goodale, announced the formal establishment of Firefighters National Memorial Day. The second Sunday in September of each year, for 2020, obviously it was yesterday, is now designated in memory of firefighters who have fallen in the line of duty. I think we also recognize all of those who have died as a result of the various diseases and conditions that they acquire doing that very difficult work. On the 13th, the Canadian flag is half-masted on all federal buildings and establishments. Here in Nanaimo, flags have been at half-mast in all fire stations under the order of Chief Fry. The Government of Canada recognizes the dangers firefighters often face when carrying out their duties and the ultimate sacrifice who have given their lives in the line of duty. Firefighters National Memorial Day will commemorate their courage, their selflessness, and their unwavering commitment to serving our communities. And we know that it's not just in facing the dangers of fire, it's in dealing with the outcome of fires, it's in dealing with the death that often occurs, it's in dealing with people with all sorts of other issues that firefighters are called to attend. As we work through this last few days when all of the air we breathe and see everywhere in this province is clouded with smoke, and we think of the chemicals, we worry about the fire that happened south of the airport the other day and what that means in terms of the health of the firefighters who attended to just extinguish that blaze. We're conscious of the risks they take every day on our behalf. And so, as mayor, I'm pleased that this city does recognize Firefighters National Memorial Day, and that we are so well served by such an amazing group of firefighters in this community who continue to do good work every day, day in, day out, and who deserve our respect and our thanks. And finally, this city, getting a bit of a reputation for culture, much deserved over the years. I can think of the symphony, for instance, when I look at Councillor Turley. There's an obvious and easy example. We're now accepting applications for funding assistance to support the 2021 activities of nonprofit community organizations. Funds are available in 3 streams: Culture and Heritage Operating Grants, Culture and Heritage Project Grants, and the Downtown Event Revitalization Fund. These funding opportunities provide for a range of activities, including arts and culture programs and events that generate social, cultural, and economic impact and contribute to the vibrancy and quality of life for residents and visitors to Nanaimo. In 2020, over 45 local organizations received funds through these 3 grant streams. Now, I know there has been a certain controversy around a mural in our community, and I'm just cheeky enough to not be able to pass up this opportunity to comment on it. And I realize it may not have pleased everyone, but on the other hand, a lot of people were pleased by it. But that is the importance of art and culture. Some people don't like certain types of music. I'm sure Councillor Turley and Councillor Thorpe and myself of that generation may have appreciated rock bands that are simply out of fashion now. Some of us remember with fondness the Beatles, otherwise, some other days, some people find them a little blasé. What I know is that a community that wants to be a real city supports its arts and culture, and the Culture and Heritage Program and the grants that are available are a tangible demonstration of this city. I don't say this council necessarily, but I think I can say it on behalf of this council, a tangible recognition by this community that it's important in Nanaimo, and we're going to continue to support it. And if it draws little controversy from time to time, so be it. Art should be provocative, it should be interesting, it should be all things. Communities that don't recognize their culture and heritage are rather dull places. We have pride of place in this community. The Sinémic have been creating great art here for thousands of years. We simply, in one respect, carry on a tradition that the humanity that's occupied these lands for a very long time has always done. It is now richer and broader and more diverse as a result of immigration, and we're lucky to live in a community that has such a diversity of culture. So I invite everyone who's listening, who belongs to such organizations in the nonprofit sector, to step up to the plate, make your application. Sometimes you realize in life that you just have to ask. It's what I'm told every year about scholarships that are available. Sometimes people don't bother apply, and the only person who did gets it. So I'm not saying it's going to be like that for culture and heritage grants or projects or downtown event revitalization funding, but please step forward. Nothing further. I don't have anything to rise and report tonight. We have no presentations. Committee minutes, they've been received, no motions required. We have no consent items, but we do have a delegation tonight. And I want to welcome Bruni, who is here to speak about people without a home. Please approach the mic. It's been cleaned up, and you have 5 minutes. And the light will change to orange when you have a minute left. So please begin.
Honorable Councillors and Mayor Leonard Krogh, homelessness is on the rise like the epidemic virus. Reimagine Nanaimo must include all citizens. The homeless street on Wesley has approximately 30 residents now, mostly younger people actually, and one toilet that hardly ever has any paper. And worst of all, there is no water. No water. This is a basic human necessity. The building adjacent to this street belongs to you. It is a city service building. There's water there. There's a hose. There's even a drainage system right on the street. And I beg you to please turn on the water so people can have a drink and wash their hands, a requirement in this pandemic times. And then there's the garbage. Yeah, they throw their garbage around. They have no garbage containers. If you had to all live with your garbage, I wonder what your place would look like. And there's 50 miles of plastics floating in the ocean that we're all responsible for. They stay together out of protection from the police, Cheryl, who confiscate their belongings every chance they can, leaving them with nothing. Nothing! Dear Council, I ask for your compassion against the most vulnerable citizens of Nanaimo. And these are your citizens. Victoria is allowing people to stay in the Centennial Park. They're also looking at big buildings. Right on this street, there's a great big empty college with the doors all closed and barred off so they can't even sit on the grass. All you need is the electrical cord, have the water running, forget about renovations, because you must house these people before winter. Have you gone down there? Also, you might consider empty lots where you could put a few campers at a time and reimburse the landlord. And it wouldn't be such a big thing for the neighborhood. The worst crime of homeless people is that they have no money. And there is no affordable housing. And you know it's not even coming down the street. And every morning at 7 o'clock, you make these people move across the street. It's like a circus. You should go down there. I mean, do you have to move them so that you can bring a truck in and wash? You don't even wash, sweep the sidewalk. Sweep the sidewalk. And you make all these people move. There is 4 policemen standing around with guns. There is 4 fire department people standing around to keep them safe, they said. There's a great big truck. There's at least 3 or 4 workers. And then there's a few other workers. I don't know, there must be at least 12. How much is this costing the city? How much is this costing the city? Get them to clean up. Give them some work. They would like to have some work. They'll work for a lot cheaper. Is this a city work program? Using provincial and federal money? Because the benefit is not going to the homeless people. And yes, I asked your compassion.
1 minute.
If Jesus came to Nanaimo, he would be living on Wesley Street, Homeless Street, with the thieves and the prostitutes and the drug addicts, because all lives matter. And Reimagine Nanaimo has to start from the bottom, because how we treat the least of us is what touches our soul. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you very much. All right.
I'll say something.
Sure. Councillor Martin.
I just want to say thank you, Bruni, for your passion and your compassion. I've been to Wesley Street. I know the majority of council probably has. This council cares very much and is passionate about those without homes. We are working on it, and I am hoping...
Something right now.
Well, we should get garbage containers and water, and we can talk about that. But I just wanted to say thank you, and this city is hearing you. We know about the people. They are our citizens, and you will see a difference in about a year or two. We should see a big difference. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martman. On to reports. Mr. Lindsay, city's role in health and housing. Please.
Thank you, Your Worship. This report is a follow-up to a motion from June of this year where a draft position statement was received by council and ultimately referred to staff for comment. The city's role in health and housing referred to staff for review and comment. So, Your Worship, this report is in response to that June 15th motion. Staff have provided a summary, a commentary on that original draft, and we took some liberties where we actually took those comments and put them in an alternative draft for council's consideration. So attachment A in your package is the original draft, and attachment B is staff's recommendation if council wanted to proceed with the adoption of such an item at this time. Your Worship, I'm not going to go through the entire report, but in general, I would say what staff have identified, the original draft did a good job of identifying our role as a convener and a facilitator on this topic. But I think the work that staff did here, we're trying to also outline that the city also plays a substantial role as a contributor and funder, and lists a number of projects and properties that the city's been involved in over the years to specifically address homelessness, including the provision of land, including provision of rent supplements, waiving development cost charges, so on a variety of topics that are outlined in the report. And I'd also note that staff have identified the role as a regulator, and I don't think that should be understated. The city has a role through our zoning bylaw, and we've made a number of changes over the years to encourage affordable housing, including I think one of the most significant steps is being one of the first communities in BC to outright legalize secondary suites in 2004. And we've had over 3,000 safe, non-subsidized rental units built under that program in that time. So the city has taken some action as a regulator. So trying to summarize that in the response or in our comments this evening, Your Worship. The two options for council's consideration. I know the council just asked us for our comments, and those have been provided. We do recognize the work of the Health and Housing Task Force is continuing, and council may wish to refer this draft to that task force as part of their consideration. And the second option we've put for council is you may wish to endorse the alternative draft that's attached to this evening's report. Certainly happy to take any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lindsay. Three things. Councillor Armstrong has a question.
Yep.
Yep. Councillor Hemmons wants to make a motion, and I just want to express on behalf of council our thanks to Ms. Cronsel in particular, who prepared the report to council. I think we all appreciate the pressure that that particular section of our city staff are facing, working with the Health and Housing Task Force and facing what is the greatest source of communication that the city receives from the general public. Councillor Armstrong.
Mine goes to the enhancing communication again, where I see including facilitation of positive dialogue. I still struggle with positive dialogue because that shows a bias where you can't bring any negative issues that happen. So I would personally like to see that replaced with respectful dialogue. Because right now, positive dialogue eliminates anybody that's had any negative experiences, in my opinion. And I know when I suggested that last time, it was met with favor by a lot in the public, because I don't think anybody at council had an issue with respectful dialogue, which I think is less biased. Thank you. Thank you.
Councillor Hemmons.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd actually, as the original author of the housing statement, like to defer this for 6 months' time, the first February council meeting. And if I can get a seconder, I'll share my rationale for that.
Seconded, Councillor Brown, although.
Okay. So the Health and Housing Task Force is obviously undergoing a massive process that is parallel to a number of other processes in the city that is trying to figure out what the city's role is, what we're going to do, et cetera, et cetera. My intention with the housing statement was to get out ahead of that work. I didn't want the Health and Housing Task Force to wrestle with necessarily what is the city's role. I think that's our job as 9 council to do that. So I don't support it going back to the Health and Housing Task Force, and given that we're in this process of possibly reorganizing ourselves around a new mandate in this realm, that I'd like to defer it. Give it about 6 months' time. I can digest it. We can all digest it. We'll all have a lot more information in terms of where we're at with housing. So, and I do want to acknowledge that Ms. Cronstall did capture those broader themes that I was trying to tease out. I still don't think it's quite where I was hoping to go, and that's another piece of why I'm deferring it. But I recognize that staff time did go in, and I'm grateful. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong?
On that deferral, I'd agree, because I would like to see the recommendations that come forward from the House and Housing Task Force, because I think that would maybe position us as to which way we want to go if we agree or disagree. So totally in favor of the deferral. Thank you.
For what it's worth, I think it's a very wise move in the circumstances, particularly with the amount of work that the task force, Councillors Bonner and Hemmons in particular, I want to thank you both, and all of the staff and the other community folks who've stepped forward or been designated on behalf of their various organizations. It's important work. I had the pleasure of attending as a bystander, so to speak, the meeting the other week to hear Dr. Turner and what she's had to say, and it's a very impressive volume of work, and I'm hopeful that we will see things that will come out of it that will be of enormous assistance, not just to this city, but to other communities in this province who are all struggling and facing the same very difficult issues. So unless anyone else wants to say something, all those in favor of the motion to defer to the first meeting in February? Opposed? None? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Heritage Alteration Permit number HAP 00030-421 Franklin Street. Mr. Lindsay, and I have to tell you that I can remember playing badminton there with Councillor Thorpe.
Oh, just yesterday.
Well, about close to 40 years ago, but let's not get technical.
I guess we're heritage too.
Well, we don't have any statues to now to take down. They're going to take down the old councillors. Mr. Lindsay, sorry for the interjections here.
Thank you, Your Worship.
Do carry on.
Here this evening seeking Council's direction on the issuance of a heritage alteration permit for the property at 421 Franklin Street. And as you alluded to, this is the gym known as the Franklin Street Gym, and there are some images of that building attached as attachment B in your package this evening. The building itself was built in 1922, as outlined in the report, and today it exists within our Heritage Conservation Area and is on the Heritage Conservation List. And as a result of that, in order to do any external renovations or demolition of the building, a heritage alteration permit is required. In this case, obviously, the property, the building and the property are owned by the school board, and they've been investigating since 2018 how to proceed with this building. It was vacant now as a result of a fire in the fall of 2018. After looking at options for renovations, they've determined the best path forward is to actually demolish the building. So this is the first step, Your Worship, in obtaining that permit. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that Council may have.
Thank you very much. Not surprisingly, Councillor Thorpe's first.
Thank you, Your Worship. No, maybe there are questions, but I'm prepared to move the recommendation. But I must admit first, and quite openly, that the mayor was a better badminton player than I ever was. So there's some good memories there, but I'll move the recommendation.
Second.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to update some information on the discussion, and that is that it was also used by students who went to Quesnel School for things like band practice, and I actually played Robin Hood in one of the plays that was put on there.
Councillor,
Not to be outdone by you two. You know.
I was just going to say, Councillor Turley, it's interesting how your early role didn't turn you into a socialist. You were a better actor than a, no. Sorry, forgive me. It's been a long day already. For what it's worth, and I'm being relatively serious. I mean, it's always a sad thing when older buildings have to come down, but the damage done to this one in particular, and it's not the most attractive older building we have in Nanaimo. If this had a lovely facade and some private developer was prepared to incorporate it as part of a new development or something like that, I might have some interest in opposing this, but on the face of it, this one really needs to go for a whole series of reasons. So unless anyone wishes to say anything further, all those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is development permit application number DP 1163-1220, 1225, and 1221 Manzanita Place. Mr. Lindsay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to defer the next three items to Jeremy Holm, who's our Director of Development Approvals, who will introduce them for Council.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Mr. Holm.
Thank you, Your Worship and Council. Good evening. The first development permit here on the agenda is 1220, 1225, 1221 Manzanita Place for 16-unit development. It's proposed under one development permit application, although it's 3 properties. There's an overall site plan shown on attachment D, if you could bring that up. So it's a cohesive form and character approach to 3 separate properties on Manzanita that are located off Ocean Pearl Terrace up in the Rock City Road area. And the zoning is R6, neighborhood designated. It's a contemporary design, and there are some variances requested, partly to help the site develop in a manner that is less disturbing to the site and more respectful of the slopes. It's an area that has some significant topography, rocky outcrops, and the like there. The variances are to increase the maximum allowable building height, reduce the minimum front yard setback, and to reduce the minimum required rear yard setback. And the total again is 16 units, 5 units on 1220 Manzanita, 6 units on 1225, and then another 5 units on 1221.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
The council should development permit number DP 1163 at 1220, 1225, and 1221 Manzanita Place with the following variances. Increase the maximum allowable building height from 7 meters to 7.75 meters at 1220 Manzanita Place to 8.93 meters at 1225 Manzanita Place and 8.7 meters at 1221 Manzanita Place. Reduce the minimum required front yard setback from 6 meters to 3.25 meters at 1225 Manzanita Place and from 6 meters to 4.5 meters at 1221 Manzanita Place, and reduce the minimum required rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 5.8 meters at 1225 Manzanita Place.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. Any discussion? Wise man builds his house upon the rock. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. That was easy, Mr. Holm. The next is development permit application number DP 1172-2348 Kenworth Road. Please.
Great. Thank you, Your Worship. So this is a redevelopment of a property that is part of the old Medill site that was previously rezoned to Core 3 corridor zone with a site-specific provision for auto sales, rental, and service. And the property is, I guess, identified on attachment B in the report. It's the future home of the Mitsubishi car dealership, and as was contemplated through the rezoning, it's a development permit for a car dealership, contemporary design. The design is, or the renderings are shown on attachment F here in the report. It does include a second-story mezzanine as well. The main dealership floor area is single story, but it includes a second story mezzanine. So attachment F shows the, I believe should show some renderings there. And it also includes a landscape rooftop patio area, an amenity space on the second story there above the garage. And there are some variances included in the proposal, and they're outlined in the recommendation, but include minimum reduction to the maximum permitted front yard setback, a waiver of the requirement for full 2 floors for the building, and allowable parking between the front property line and the front face of the building. And that's all I have to add. Happy to take questions.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to staff, if I may, do you know if all of the runoff water is going to be dealt with in the existing pond there, or what are they calling it, the retention pond?
Yeah, actually the landscape plan on attachment G, I believe, shows a detention pond that will be between the development and the existing ENN rail. And it should accommodate the stormwater flows from the site. It's been designed, so the subdivision for the property was done in consideration of the proposed development, and they're incorporating this storm detention pond to accept the storm drainage from the site.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong?
The council issued development permit number DP 1172 at 2348 Kenworth Road with the following variances: to increase the maximum permitted front yard setback from 6 meters to 22.41 meters for 100% of the front face of the building, to waive the minimum building height requirement to allow the building as proposed, and to allow parking between the front property line and the front face of the proposed building.
Second, Councillor Thorpe. No discussion, but I do want to comment that this particular development in terms of connectivity and the roundabout, I love roundabouts, I just think is a really nice development on that property in terms of using that land for those purposes. Compliments to Mr. Sims and his department, Mr. Holm and Mr. Lindsay. I think it's a nice, it's a very effective route. It's useful for getting in and out of Bevan Park for many folks. It serves lots of purposes. So to the developers and you folks, well done. All those in favor? Contrary? Motion carries. Thank you. The next is development permit application number DP 1177-195 and 191 and 195 4th Street. Mr. Holm again.
Thank you, Your Worship. This is actually the redevelopment of the old city fire hall, and it's being leased by Nanaimo Search and Rescue, still owned by the city. And so that's being redeveloped to accommodate the search and rescue, to upgrade the building to meet BC Building Code, and to seismically upgrade the building as well, and to reinstate overhead doors, which were originally provided for in the fire hall use on Chesterley. The property is zoned CS1, a community service zone. And there's no actual proposal to increase the existing footprint. The existing footprint of the building will remain the same. It's largely cosmetic and functional improvements and structural improvements to the existing fire hall that allows a better use of the facility by Nanaimo Search and Rescue. And there's some renderings on attachment F that give a good idea of what's proposed here. The design reflects the historic use as a fire hall. And there are a number of variances that are proposed to reduce the minimum required rear yard setback, and that actually reflects an existing condition on the property. It doesn't actually change the siting of the building. To reduce the minimum landscape buffer width for a side yard, again, that's an existing condition with some existing vegetated screening there, and to eliminate a requirement for shrub planting along the sides of the garbage enclosure, which is being screened with wood detail, and then also to reduce the required setback for a garbage enclosure. Otherwise, yeah, the development permit does a nice job of reflecting the historic use of the fire hall while providing a new safe and suitable home for search and rescue.
Thank you very much. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through you to Mr. Holm. So attachment G, the landscape plan and details, and I may have asked this before, but I don't recall the answer. It appears that this nice-looking landscape piece extends out into 4th Street. Is that, am I misreading that, or?
Oh, the landscape piece
Yeah.
is, that's correct, yeah, it's between the front entrance of the building and 4th Street there, predominantly, yeah.
So it's not actually on 4th Street?
Oh, it's actually on the site. It does project, the landscape plan is showing it projecting somewhat into the road right of way, that's right.
Okay.
4th Street is actually up for, maybe I'll just add a little bit to that. There's currently a process underway to design improvements to 4th Street as a city capital project, and there'll probably be some changes along the frontage that are coming out of that process to improve transportation linkage from downtown up through Harewood, connecting through to the university there too.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you very much. Councillor Armstrong.
If council issue development permit number P1177 at 191 and 195 4th Street with the following variances. Reduce the minimum required rear yard setback from 7.5 meters to 1.3 meters. Reduce the minimum landscape buffer width for the side and rear yard from 1.8 meters to 0 meters. Eliminate the requirement for shrub plantings on the sides of the garbage enclosures and reduce the minimum required setback for the garbage enclosure from 3 meters to 1.5 meters.
Seconder, Councillor Hemmons. No further questions. I just want to express my thanks, as I have before on behalf of council, to the search and rescue. And I'm a search and rescue folks do an amazing work in often extremely difficult circumstances and dealing with extremely difficult situations. All volunteers, and I also want to express my thanks to the very generous donor who gave so much money to this project, who wishes to remain anonymous. I won't even say, I'll just say God bless the person. I won't identify gender even. But it's a wonderful thing, and this is a lovely improvement for the neighborhood. I think, again, some of us who've been here a while are very familiar with that old structure, and this is a marvelous improvement to it. So thank you very much. I want to say that again publicly. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. The next is the Wakesiah Avenue Corridor Improvement Project. Mr. Sims.
Thank you, Your Worship. Appreciate the opportunity to be in front of you. I'm actually going to speak briefly about both. You have 2 information reports in front of you, and I'll just touch on both of them. And if Council has some more detailed questions, Mr. Rosen and Mr. Rose are both in the gallery this evening. So the genesis of these reports was back in May when we started talking about the potential for stimulus programs as a result of the pandemic. So staff presented quite a long list of potential projects, and these are 2 of the ones that Council selected and directed us to come back with further information. So we're providing, I would say, sort of a little bit more detailed scope, and you can see in the report there's still some questions to be answered from before we get too deep into it. In both cases, I would say infrastructure renewal that is driving the need, as well as the community expectation for improved transportation corridors. So in the example of Wakesiah, we have got a design underway and plans in place to start rolling that out in 2024, starting with water and storm drainage. It's a large, expensive project, as most of the transportation projects are, and it's general revenue funded. So that one is as planned. The other one is Terminal Avenue, and there's a number of sections in there, and the main focus would be between Esplanade and Comox in the so-called Terminal Trench. There's several $1 million worth of work in that particular section as well, and we're just starting to go through the capital planning process and prepare that for council. So we suggest sort of any more detailed discussions on that maybe be rolled into that discussion. Yeah, and I think I can leave it there. There's some, I'd be happy to take questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sims. Councillor Turley.
Thank you, Worship. Through to Mr. Sims with regard to Terminal Avenue. I know the property at 50 Terminal Avenue. The landowner owns basically the curb. Basically, there is an easement that's been granted for I think it's sewer and sidewalk. But the concern, if there's widening happening, how do you deal with private property? And the reason I would have a concern about it, not that I'm involved in it, I want to state that no conflict, is the awning would have to have aerial trespass, and if the building was to meet a 75% fade in destruction, there'd be a challenge with regard to repair versus rebuilding. And
Your Worship, I think rather than me speculating, because I think what the intent is that we were squeezing the road down a little bit, I'd prefer to get the factual information from one of my colleagues, and so maybe I'll back away from the podium.
Mr. Rosen?
Want to speak to the scope of it?
Welcome, Mr. Rosen. Your time in the spotlight tonight.
So I understand the question to be, there isn't enough road right away. Part of it's private property. There isn't enough room. Typically in a situation like that, at this point in the project, we don't have details around those sorts of things. So, well, over the next sort of year, 2 years, we'll be working on developing those details and sort of overcoming those challenges. Like typically we would work with the property owners, try and make things work within the property we have. If we don't have enough room there, we would try and acquire some property. So there's a typical process there we have to go through. In this particular case, we haven't done that yet. So
that's good. Thanks.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Your Worship. My questions are regarding Wekasaya. If I remember correctly, this was moved back, but it was originally going to be done sooner than later, and it got bumped back. And I look at it as a key joiner between the work that we're doing through Boxwood, and I'm specifically talking about bike lanes here, but also transportation. Having been on Wekasaya when it's busy, that's a road that really needs some help. So my question here is I'm reading staff's report, and I see the only reason that we would not move this forward is because there's not enough, or they don't think they see any grants coming from the feds on this one. So if that's the only reason, and it was already in our plan prior to this, and there weren't any grants then either, why couldn't we just put it back in? Like because what I'm looking for some options here. Like if we were to push this one forward, which project do we need to bump back a bit to accommodate the costs and that sort of thing?
So the Wekasaya project, it's quite an expensive project. I think all 3 phases are about $10 million. So it's a very large project. There's a large general revenue component to it. So council may recall last year when we were going through the capital planning process, we had in the previous year before that, we had Wekasaya in, I think it might have been in 21 or 22. We had it fairly, maybe even in this year. The problem was we couldn't make the numbers go around. There just wasn't enough resources to deliver all the capital projects, because Wekasaya is a really good project, but we still have to trade that off against the other needs, the other sort of urgent projects, like the storm sewers and the sidewalks and the other asphalt renewals. All those things need to be sort of balanced and some choices made around which ones are the most high priority. And that was a case where Wekasaya was a very large project. We were able to buy some time by installing some patching there. That gives the city a little bit of breathing room to not necessarily save some money up, but work with both the school district and the university to develop some partnering opportunities along the corridor, maybe some cost-sharing opportunities. If council was interested in accelerating that project, I think there would be some tough choices to make in terms of the capital plan. So I would suggest that council make those decisions or have that discussion as part of the budgetary process this fall, because there will be some trade-offs there against other projects that also have a compelling case for them.
And if I may, I would like to have that conversation. It's just that I don't see any options here. It's basically, we should just bump it back and that's it, just because, it talks about granting, that sort of thing. So when we do have this conversation, I would like to see what projects could be bumped back as well, and what would be the consequences of doing that, so that I can make a better decision, I think. That's what I'd be looking for. When we do have the conversation, I would like to see that conversation happen.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Bonner's comments actually reflect mine as well. Reading this report, I didn't find there was a lot of information, and my understanding from the session that we had back in May was that, the last line reads, should there be an appetite to discuss the timing of this project, it should be done so as part of the overall budgeting process. My impression from when we met in May and we talked about a lot of things was, is there potential capital projects that we want to accelerate, looking at a variety of ways to fund them for a variety of reasons, one of them being around generating work in our community while delivering projects. And so I was a little shocked actually when I read this report, and it didn't have any options. I think it's some of these things that are highlighted are very important to consider, but there was no options around if council wishes to proceed, and that's what I would expect on any of those projects identified. So I very much read this report as just an information report on how to maintain the status quo, and that might be a route the council picked, but I don't think this leaves no decision-making points. So my questions actually are, since May, in the past 4 months, specifically what options were explored on how this project could be advanced if council wanted to do that? And you mentioned VIU and the school district and Mr. Rosen, and my question again would be, were any meetings held with VIU or the school district to discuss the advancement of this project and collaboration opportunities?
So the question is, were discussions held with VIU and the school district around this specific project?
Yes.
My understanding is that there's been some discussions with VIU around the funding they have available to work with the city on a project like this.
In the
we
last
haven't had
4
any
months?
detail.
Sorry.
I don't know exactly when the meeting took place. May not have been within the past 4 months. It wasn't engineering that had the meeting with them.
Okay, and then my other question is then, since May, that is the 4 months, what specific options were explored on how this project could be realized if council made that decision on a more accelerated timeline?
The challenge with this project is the funding. It's a very expensive project. And to do this project, there either has to be a significant impact on taxation, or a lot of other projects would have to be set aside. And that's a discussion that it just can't occur in the context of just Wake Asaya, because there's all these other impacts. So that's why we're recommending it take place as part of an overall budgetary process discussion, just because it has there's so many other implications than just this project.
Thank you, and just a comment, I guess, it's not related to this particular project, but we met in May to discuss capital projects. I very much agree that we need to be having this conversation holistically and looking at things, but here we are piecemeal getting a report. It does not make sense to me, and not related to this particular project, but both of them. How do we have this conversation if there is no options and there is no context in relation to other projects? It just really doesn't make sense to me.
I think I appreciate what you're getting at, Councillor Brown, in terms of options, but I suspect it really boils down to the same old option as always. If this, large project goes ahead, it means half a dozen other ones that are necessary and important and aren't maybe as, how shall I say, exciting on the face of it, are going to have to be deferred. And I suspect as part of the budget discussions, that's when, as we are now a more experienced council, we'll have to zero down and look at the list and say, are we prepared to sacrifice, how many kilometers or feet or meters of storm sewer in order to complete the project from Wake Asaya? These are, and this is where it's going to get tough this fall, and it's going to get tough because I think, as Mr. Rosen has pointed out, the university is not exactly flush with cash now either. And I suspect the school board is having its difficulties dealing with COVID. So we're going to have some tough decisions if we're going to move this one up the priority chain. Councillor Thorpe.
Thank you, Your Worship. Firstly, through you to staff, I appreciate getting these information reports. If nothing else, it's encouraging to know that staff are still looking at these projects and plan to move them on, and we can discuss the timing if we wish to. My question relates to the Terminal Avenue report, because I think Council recently, if I recall, received an email that asked us whatever happened to Terminal Nickel Reimagined, and I think this report answers that question. So that's encouraging. I think that was a very exciting initiative back in 2015. So I'm pleased to see that it's still being envisioned, and we're going to be acting upon it. Specifically, my question is thinking back to the visioning that happened around the reimagining of that area. Are we going to be taking the specific recommendations from the report from that time as a starting point for this project? And I know this is early days and it's in the future yet, but there was an awful lot of work there that did envision how phases of this project might look. So my question again is that going to be our starting point, or are we sort of starting from scratch?
I would say we're starting with a blank slate, but we've got this basket of ideas that were developed as part of the Terminal Nickel Reimagined. And so we'll pick and choose the ideas that we can make work within the corridor, you know, as it is. We're given a certain amount of space within the corridor, and there's other constraints that we have to deal with, and not all the ideas can be achieved with the, you know, with the budget we would have available and the sort of the scope of the work. But we would try and achieve the intent of the Terminal Nickel Reimagined by picking and choosing these different pieces of it to try and assemble into a concept there.
Right, thank you. And if I may, Your Worship, yes, as I recall, the intent at that time was to do the project gradually, piece by piece, but keeping general principles in mind of what we wanted that stretch to look like. And I also recall that the Ministry of Transportation was actively involved in creating some of those ideas and gave their approval to many of them. So that I found very encouraging at the time, and hopefully they'll still be on board. Thank you.
Councillor Armstrong.
Thank you. I just wanted to remind Council that this was just a request for information. It wasn't a request to make any decisions at this time. It was just where are we on these projects? And I appreciate the honesty that, you know, we don't have the money. I mean, we're looking at COVID, which has had a huge impact on our tax base and everything, and you know, $10,000, 10% tax increase, you know, if we look at it in that perspective. And there's other pressures that I'm sure we will be hearing about from our CAO in the very near future, which is going to be significant capital stuff. So I think we have to remember that come budget talks, that there's some stuff that we're going to have to do statutorily, and we're not going to have any options. Thank you.
Councillor Bonner.
Thank you, Worship, and appreciate comments of everybody here. And I'm just a voice here. I have an appetite to discuss this, but as I go on learning to be a counselor, I understand that that does not necessarily mean things will happen. So what happens from now? Do we need a motion that we want to discuss this, that thing? Is my talking enough to staff? Like, just want to know where we're going from here.
I think Mr. Rudolph wants to say something.
I think Councillor Armstrong summarized our understanding what the ask was, is to bring it back for further discussion. This is not a budget, this is not in the budget process. We have a complicated budget process. We need to present this in the context of everything else. We can certainly present to you options around this or consequences. I think that's what the issue is. But you need to see the entire process. So we've had 6 months of COVID. We've had a very aggressive capital works program for this year, which we are well on track to delivering and under budget. We've had a transition of leadership at the university, which has changed the landscape, and they've been very focused on other matters, so we've not really been able to have a focused conversation on that road frontage part there. So the part that Mr. Rosen indicated about the seeking partnerships, and of course the school district themselves have been extremely busy with all the issues that they've had to deal with the COVID. So we've not been able to progress. We've had conversations with both parties, but this hasn't been at the top of the list of things that they wanted to talk about, to be honest. So we felt that we needed to buy some time on that project just from that point of view to get some traction with the hope of getting some understanding of how they could partner and we could
utilize the street right away in a way that would stimulate their development plans and so forth. On the terminal, I'm a little not so sure I can communicate in an effective way a detailed plan because they don't exist at this stage. So we're commenting on, you're asking us to do more detailed planning on this, which I think is fair, and that's what Mr. Rosen has indicated he's prepared to do. So the matter that's actually come up on some of the task forces as well about, I remember attending a task force on economic development, and they were talking about the importance of this gateway. So but it's such a large project and it's very expensive, it's hard to advance this without the certainty that we need with our budget process. So it was certainly prepared to bring these back in advance of the budget process for if you're looking for more details on how to progress. And there's just some limitations, I guess, right now with our fiscal picture, and we're obviously working through that and presenting that to you later in November. So fair comment. The expectations may not have been, we might not have delivered on what some members of council were looking for, but if there's some specifics that you would like to spend more time unpacking these corridors and looking at the details of them and that type of thing, be pleased to do that and bring that back, and then cost them out accordingly. And it's a web of funding that is almost magical that's put together by the engineering and the finance department on how to package DCCs and various accounts from the water utilities and sewers to build a project, and so the surface is part of that. So. Appreciate your indulgence. We were simply responding to what we thought was the ask.
Anything further on the reports? Thank you very much. Much appreciated. We are on to bylaws. Subdivision Control Amendment Bylaw number, 2020, number 3260.05. Councillor Armstrong.
And Subdivision Control Amendment Bylaw 2020 number 3260.05 to amend Schedule A Manual of Engineering Standards and Specifications be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. Discussion, all those in favor? Adopted, motion carried. The next is Housing Agreement Bylaw 2020 number 7313. Councillor Armstrong.
That Housing Agreement Bylaw 2020 number 7313 to authorize a housing agreement for student housing at 326 Wakasaya Avenue be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Hemmens. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. Item C, Housing Agreement Bylaw 2020 number 7314. Councillor Armstrong.
That Housing Agreement Bylaw 2020 number 7314 to authorize a housing agreement to prevent any future restrictions on the rental of individual units at 20 Barsby Avenue be adopted.
Seconded, Councillor Thorpe. No discussion. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. We have the bylaw status sheet for information only. Number 14, notices of motion. Councillor Bonner.
Thank you. I'd like to bring a notice of motion to council. I believe it'll be at the next council meeting. It'll be put forward that council directs staff to report back to council on options for Nanaimo to participate in a potential Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure pilot project limiting residential speed limits.
Thank you very much. Any other business? Who wants to make the magic motion?
Motion to adjourn.
Seconded, Councillor Martman. All those in favor? Yay. Motion carries. Thank you very much.